It's my great pleasure to introduce Zach Blas, artist, thinker, and dear friend. I knew Zach's work long before I ever saw him or met him in person, because I'd seen these images of him wearing this really intense metal mask. Maybe some of you can remember this as well. And honestly, I was a little intimidated. But we finally met in person at Transmediale in 2014 on a panel about obscurity. And we became fast friends, cementing our future relationship as a recurrent peanut gallery at so many media arts conferences and events. But my favorite memory of Zach is from the Influencers Festival in Barcelona. Zach gave a performative lecture that culminated in invoking the work of Paul B. Preciado. And I just recall being called up to join him on stage, rolling up my sleeve, taking a magic marker, drawing an oblong on my arm, and then being instructed to vigorously masturbate my arm. So, needless to say, I'm very much looking forward to Zach's lecture today. Also, I want to mention that Zach is one of our exhibiting artists in Refiguring the Future, which I neglected earlier to mention is taking place at 205 Hudson Street downtown at the Hunter College Gallery there, and is open until March 31st. So make sure not to miss that. And here comes the official bio. Zach is an artist, filmmaker, and writer whose practice spans technical investigation, theoretical research, conceptualism, performance, and science fiction. His practice engages with technology, queerness, and politics to question the underlying structures of contemporary technologies. He has exhibited, lectured, and held screenings internationally, including at the Gwangju Biennial, the Berlin International Film Festival, Art in General, the Van Abbe Museum, and many, many others. Blas's writing has been widely published, including in You Are Here, Art After the Internet, Queer, Documents of Contemporary Art, and the Efflux Journal. He is a lecturer in the Department of Visual Cultures at Goldsmiths, University of London, and a 2018 through 20 Arts and Humanities Research Council Leadership Fellow. Please join me in welcoming Zach Blas.
Hi, everyone. Okay. So what I want to share with you today, I guess you could call it shards or fractured bits of research and thought and making that I have been doing over the years, spanning fantasy and material reality, science fiction and longing and desire and attempting to conjure alternatives. And I've been doing a lot of research about magic 8-balls recently, so I brought one. And I wanted to start by asking it a serious question, which is, will we ever reach a future beyond the corporate internet as we know it? It tells me to focus and try again. But I don't trust it anyway. Okay, so there seemed to be much similarity between this toy, the Magic 8-ball, and various predictive technologies that exist today, whether data analytics broadly or predictive policing and security risk assessment software specifically, because they both present fantasies of prediction that may seem boundless or even magical, but in fact, they're both constituted of material and constraint. And they both, as it were, toy with the future. So when the Magic 8-ball is actually opened, when the exterior shell is removed, and you drain this blue liquid that's in the center, what you'll find in the interior of the Magic 8-ball is a 20-sided die, which is called an icosahedron. So you have 20 options in the Magic 8-ball for predicting the future. 10 positive, 5 non-committal or neutral, which I just received, and also 5 negative responses. So kind of bearing witness to the kind of material construction of the icosahedron, right, kind of makes us realize so much for being boundless, and also talk about a stacked deck or die towards positivity. And I think on the one hand, this magic 8-ball might evoke like the black boxing of technology. But it is, of course, modeled after a much older device of prediction, which is the crystal ball. And as most of us know, a crystal ball, which is a typically transparent object, is used in practices of fortune telling, seeing the future, what is also known as scrying. It's an object of mediation par excellence, we could say, and yet its transparent materiality and mystical functioning always seem to suggest that the crystal ball is precisely without mediation. And we know this so well from popular culture alone, because right in Harry Potter, for instance, mastering the art of the crystal ball is a pedagogical requisite to become a wizard, right? To see, to predict, to act on, and intervene into the future. And in one of my favorites, the 1986 film Labyrinth, David Bowie demonstrates to Jennifer Connelly the magical transformative properties of the crystal ball.
I've brought you a gift.
What is it?
It's a crystal. Nothing more. But if you turn it this way, look into it, it'll show you your dreams. But this is not a gift for an ordinary girl who takes care of a screaming baby. Do you want it? Then forget the baby.
I can't. It is that I don't appreciate what you're trying to do for me, but I want my brother back. He must be so scared.
Sarah.
Okay, so in both instances, the crystal ball enables a seemingly transparent vision of the future for prediction in the case of Harry Potter, or to see and elsewhere, as in the case of Labyrinth. In another example, in Elizabethan England, John Dee is a figure that I've been quite fascinated with. John Dee is at once a mystic, a mathematician, and he was also advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. And you could say he pioneered using the crystal ball to serve both queen and country by communing with spirits and gazing into the future. And here you can see John Dee's various mystical objects, which are on permanent display at the British Museum. So basically all of Dee's mystical research and activities were all performed in the service of England. And in fact, John Dee is credited with coining the phrase British Empire. So with John Dee, you have something like a mystical mathematician, you could say, a kind of really striking example of using a magically predictive object for a political, nationalist, and colonialist agenda. But if we skip some centuries to the present from John Dee, a new kind of mystical mathematician emerges, and also a new kind of scrying practice, looking into crystal balls, has found its way into the world when in 2004, Palantir Technologies was founded in Silicon Valley, more precisely Palo Alto, California. Palantir is co-founded by Alex Karp, currently CEO, and Peter Thiel, chairman. And Palantir is a data analytics company that specifically focuses on counterterrorism for the US intelligence community, heavily supporting the CIA. And it's been rumored for some time that the company's software aided in the tracking and killing of Osama bin Laden. But Palantir also has a second platform, which is supporting finance data management for Wall Street. And more recently, in the United States, the company has accelerated predictive policing, specifically in California. So in 2015, the company was valued at over $20 billion, as they are heavily backed by such governmental intelligence agencies, as well as various undisclosed private enterprises, which makes Palantir one of Silicon Valley's most valuable private enterprises. So as I said, Palantir consists of two platforms. There's Gotham, which was formerly known as Government, and it's used by governmental security agencies and private counter-terrorist outfits, as well as US law enforcement and Homeland Security, right, all with particular US interests. And Gotham works by aggregating large amounts of data and then placing this in a centralized database that can be visualized and analyzed. And you'll note here, right, the evocation of Gotham City, where Batman fights crime. And here it's hard not to wonder if Teal and Kemp, some kind of techno-corporate Batman and Robin, longingly wish to project their Palantir logo into the California sky. And so then there's Palantir Foundry, which was very recently used to be known as Metropolis, which offers quantitative analysis for Wall Street banks and hedge funds. It's a platform more oriented towards commercial benefit than governmental, if we can even separate the two, right? Even though Palantir have already made this separation in their software. And although, right, the software has now been renamed, if we go back to this original name of Metropolis, we once again find ourselves in the terrain of comic book superheroes, as Metropolis is the home to Superman. But you might be wondering, or maybe not, some of you probably already know, what exactly is a Palantir?
The power of Isengard is at your command, Sauron, Lord of the Earth. Ask Oriak, build me an army worthy of Mordor.
Okay, so Palantir, it turns out, is the all-seeing crystal ball used by wizards in J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, specifically for communication and for seeing other parts of the world. So you've just watched and are still looking at the evil wizard Saruman at work with a Palantir. So right, this means a Palantir sits squarely within the fantastical terrain of magic, wizards, and the mystical. And this also means then that Palantir Technologies also places itself in this arena, a data analytics company who encourages you to use their software platforms more like crystal scrying than working with or only analyzing data. So quite simply, this kind of appropriation of the Palantir frames the crystal ball as that which can do, or in fact, right, claiming that it does the work of big data analysis. So that said then, Palantir Technologies must be run by two wizards, Teal and Karp. And at Palantir, one of Teal and Karp's sworn goals is to protect privacy and civil liberties. If privacy and civil liberties are not already violated by Palantir's concealed collaborations with the NSA and other international security agencies, we could ask another question. Is a crystal ball ever fully under the control of a single wizard, or even two? So let's take Peter Thiel, a conservative, a gay man, a kind of wavering Trump supporter, naturalized American citizen. We could just shorten all that and call him a homo nationalist. The platform of the Palantir seems to have ultimately set in motion for Peter Thiel a practice of crystal scrying in order to activate an alt-right political program that is based on freedom, according to him, but not democracy. Right, and maybe some of you are familiar with this quote. Peter Thiel said not so long ago that I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. A statement that we could interpret in a different way on the left if you prefer something like communism. But I think Peter Thiel's alternative to democracy is a kind of totalized Google state, techno-utopian, completely neoliberal, private corporations with artificial intelligence gods that promise immortality through the imminently arriving technological singularity. And they all tell us that it will be here really soon, really. But whatever is on the other side of a crystal ball about reading the world's future, for Peter Thiel, it is most likely aligned and in the service of figures like Donald Trump. So here, it's really hard to not think of Peter Thiel as a distorted and datified John Dee, no longer serving the Queen of England, but the President of the United States. And when I look at this, it's hard for me not to wonder what might Trump and Thiel see in the Palantir if they did a gazing session together. But I'm going to leave that unanswered, and I'm definitely not asking the Magic 8-Ball that. Yet, in May 2017, Trump actually participated in a kind of gazing event during his first state tour to the Gulf.
I work as a content developer. We develop videos, infographics, and motion graphics to combat extremist content. A few seconds and pass it on to specialized departments for further action.
Okay, so here we see Trump, the king of Saudi Arabia, Salman bin Abdulaziz, and the Egyptian president Abdel Fattah al-Sisi at a summit in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, for the launch of a new global center for combating extremist ideology. Yes, that's its name, Global Center for Combating Extremist Ideology. The complex, this building, has been billed as Saudi Arabia's headquarters for countering extremist messaging, with more than 200 data analysts working to monitor and analyze their online activity in real time. So by placing their hands on this orb, this plasma ball, the leaders are said to have officially activated the center. And fascinatingly, maybe unexpectedly, these public images, these publicity images, drew quick comparisons to Hydra, the villainous organization bent on world domination in the Marvel Comics universe. We seem to be not able to escape this world of comic books. So with Palantir, Thiel, and Trump alike, it appears that data must turn into something fantastical or mystical, that indeed it must transform into a kind of magical substance in order to create, to see, preempt, and destroy worlds. I would call all of this metric mysticism, but what is that? So if we recall that mysticism is a kind of union or experience with an absolute or God, then in metric mysticism, God and the absolute are rendered as data. But metric mysticism is not just simply another word for data analysis. It goes at least one step further and recasts any mathematical or scientific objectivism as a kind of unwavering eternal truth, a metaphysical or transcendent truth beyond the reproach of human beings. This simply means that instead of God, the absolute is now a data absolute. Okay, but if not a Palantir, I don't want to fully dismiss the power of magic or mysticism by any means. So I wonder, what could we gaze into that is not just a Palantir? And I have decided and have started gazing into a chunk of polycrystalline silicon, which is what you're looking at. Silicon, particular polycrystalline silicon, that material at the heart of so much computational technology. What would it mean to scry, to gaze into the chunk of silicon? When we scry with silicon, it's not exactly to predict the future, but to consider, to sit with, and not let slip away the material conditions that constitute our historical present. And I think to do this reminds that any future horizon is not simply some preset computer database, but something precarious and vulnerable, open, transformable, and not fully controlled by data wizards and Palantirs, but also not fully controlled by ourselves either. I think to gaze into the silicon demands a kind of opacity, not this kind of imagined seamless transparency, as a mystical relation necessary to pursue, to let exist, as well as let thrive. So after gazing some time into the silicon chunk, I felt like I could tell a different story about the future and prediction, specifically a different story about the future of the internet. Now, I've kind of come to the conclusion that there seem to be kind of two grand narratives about the internet and control today. The first one we could call killing the internet, and this refers to the growing the increase of internet shutdowns. So since the Egyptian uprising in 2011, when then President Hosni Mubarak terminated national access to the internet for people in Egypt, there's been a dramatic increase in different types of internet shutdowns during political turmoil and unrest. And this is often referred to as flipping the internet's kill switch. And that provokes an interesting question if we stay with that metaphor. Can you actually kill infrastructure? What would that even look like? So I think a second narrative that's playing out around the internet and control is what we could refer to as disappearing the internet. And I'd like to play for you a statement that was made in 2015 at the World Economic Forum, spoken by then Google CEO Eric Schmidt when he was asked to predict the future of the internet. His response is very simple and succinct, and I'll play it for you now.
I would answer very simply that the internet will disappear.
So Schmidt's answer to the future of the internet is that it will disappear. Now, of course, he doesn't mean that the internet will just vanish. What he's referring to more specifically is the growing Internet of Things, kind of a full and total integration, reaching a period where the internet is so widespread, it's in phones, cars, refrigerators, etc., that there will be kind of no distinction to be made between the world as we know it and the internet, that the world and the internet collapse into one another, disappear into each other, and they're the same thing. So right on the one hand, we have government shutdown and then kind of corporate takeover, maybe it was a good way to paraphrase the two. But I wondered about a third option around this, and initially I was quite inspired by different types of alternative infrastructure projects happening around the world, whether with the digital stewards in Detroit or other groups trying to literally build autonomous infrastructure that's separate and apart from the corporate internet as we know it. So this kind of is about a commons, perhaps. But I think my perverted brain took me closer to an orgy than a commons. And so I ended up with this work as a kind of major grounding point for me in this work on the internet. So this was a book written in 2001 by Paul Preciado. It's called the Contrasexual Manifesto, and quite simply it argues that queer sexuality can unlock bodily possibilities that are not based on political control, but rather experimentation, transformation, and collective pleasure. So on the one hand, contrasexuality can be understood as a refusal of sexual norms, and the contra within contrasexuality prohibits an articulation of sexuality as naturalized, right? Indeed, literally speaking, the word contra-internet forces us to say against sexuality. But this means against an understanding of sexuality that is not constituted by various dominating and hegemonic powers. But at the same time, contrasexuality is also concerned with, we could say, the constitution of contra-pleasures in the body. So contrasexuality is at once a refusal, but it also attempts the construction of an alternative or alternatives. Now, in the book, Preciado explains that contrasexuality can be practiced through dildo tectonics, which is referred to as the prized science of contrasexuality. So the dildo is this chosen form, almost like a conceptual form of contrasexuality, because it is something external to the body that undoes assumptions about the body as a kind of totalized heterosexual unity. And in fact, Preciado claims the body can be mapped out, as you can see in this amazing diagram, the body can be mapped out entirely as a dildo. So this means the body has the potential to completely transform into pure contrasexuality, that pleasure can be reoriented and redirected in the body. Now, crucially and provocatively, for Preciado, the dildo is not a phallus. They're two different things. And so for Preciado, this emblem, the emblem or the representation or the diagram of the dildo is not an emblem of patriarchy for Preciado. And this is why Preciado states that a penis can be understood as a meat dildo, but a dildo is never a plastic penis. So ultimately, the dildo here can be understood as a contra pattern, basically, that when experimented with in practice reveals potentialities of contrasexuality. So to get even more explicit, and as Heather already foreshadowed, Preciado gives us exercises to practice. And one exercise in this set of Dildotopia exercises involves what Preciado calls inversion and investment. And it involves drawing a kind of diagrammatic dildo on one's arm, however you want to imagine that, and then masturbating it. And you can see there's even precise time given. The time is 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And just, I guess, for sake of proof, I've done this a few times. The first time was in Istanbul in 2014. So see, they always end up being these like group masturbatory engagements rather than going solo. But the point of doing this, these exercises in Preciado was to arrive at a particular question. And I guess this question for me can be articulated as, what are the dildo tectonics of the internet? And so what that question means, right, is that if the dildo is this form, this contra pattern that's adequate to expose norms and constructions of sexuality and sex, then I wonder what form is adequate to do this for the internet. And we note, like the dildo, it's a form, the dildo is external to the body. And so I think like the dildo, this contra pattern, this dildo tectonics of the internet, it would be external to the internet as we know it. So I don't think this form would be a network. Like I don't think it would look like a network. Which leads me to the outside. So in a 2013 book titled Off the Network, the author Ulysses Ali Miejas has a chapter called The Outside of Networks as a Method for Acting in the World. And in this chapter, the idea of the paranode is introduced, which is a term that begins to make thinkable and conceptualizable that which is other to or an alternative to a network configuration. So Miejas tells us that this paranode figures as an antidote to what he calls nodocentrism, because networks are made of nodes and edges, dots of lines. So this kind of the way the network maps the world, he calls this nodocentrism, a dominant model for organizing and assembling the social. It's a term derived from neuroscience, the idea of the paranode. And it's the negative space of networks, the noise between nodes and edges. It's a space that lies beyond the topological and conceptual limits of a node. So to try and get more specific, if you look at this famous network diagram, the paranodal space is pointed out because it's often thought of to be negative empty space. So I'm interested in traveling into this paranodal space and trying to figure it out. And I've been doing this in my practice. So for me, this means to dream the dildo diagram differently, to submit and circulate it within digital networks and neural nets, to find the contra-internet within the contrasexual. And if we return to the 8-ball, this is not just about pulling out the icosahedron, right? It's about, and laying those conditions bare, it's about completely reimagining or recasting the device, the object completely, to change the way in which it works. Because doing so might just guide us to some type of alternate future that's more equitable for us all. So to end, oh sorry, I forgot to keep moving the slides. There's the paranode. Here's deep dreaming the dildo. And I want to leave you with a song by a queer man named Joe Meek, because I think going on an outer space musical fantasy is the only way. And Joe Meek was an amazing sound engineer, but he lived in a period of time in England when homosexuality was illegal, and unfortunately he killed himself. But I think this conceptual album of a trip to outer space, this idea of hearing and anticipating some other world, but not yet there yet, for me captures so beautifully a kind of queer desire, a longing for something else that we haven't yet reached yet. So I'll leave you with this song. Thank you.
Haunting me.
installed.